Welcome back, everyone. Episode 3 of the Jack of All AI's Perspective podcast on natural language understanding. With me again is Nigel Cannings of Intelligent Voice. Nigel, what's going on? How are things in the NLU space?
Oh, it's very kind of you to ask, Jack. Well, it's great to be back. So one of the things that we were going to talk about today was some of the ways in which people are reusing kind of old technology for new use cases, but also exploring teleworking and potentially telemedicine as well. So what do you think, Jack? Shall we have a bit of a chat about what people are doing with remote working, Zoom, that type of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's quite interesting because we've all, through this pandemic, been forced now onto just Zoom, just Microsoft Teams, just Skype meetings. And really, I find it hugely frustrating, having like 10 Zoom calls a day, and B, then not actually having the ability to be quite engaged with who I'm speaking to, as well as take notes. And I think that there must be some interesting waves that are coming now in the NLU space, right?
Well, I mean, Zoom fatigue is a real problem, Jack. I mean, it's actually becoming kind of classed as a psychological problem that people are absolutely exhausted by just trying to be present in the meeting all the time. I mean, you have to kind of sit there and look smart, and not everyone is as kind of lively and engaging and sociable as you, Jack. So, they find it quite difficult to be present in these things. So, yeah, I mean, we've been looking at something, an idea that we had kind of 4 or 5 years ago now about how you capture recordings and try and make them a bit smarter. And actually, because of people working at home like this, we've actually used that to pivot our own business to have a consumer-facing business, which actually captures Zoom calls, recordings like this, and then sends you what we call a smart transcript afterwards. So, a smart transcript is not just a transcript, it's all the key things that were said, highlighted for you so you can click on them and find them really quickly, ability to search, even an edit as well. So, quick plug, meetminer.com. So take a look, grab that. But it was really more for us to try and help people with things like Zoom fatigue. But for me, I think there's a bit more, Jack, in terms of how people conduct these meetings. I mean, I don't know about you, but I go on to too many meetings where people don't have an agenda. They've not actually appointed someone to start it. And they set the thing for an hour. I mean, that seems mad to me on a Zoom call.
Yeah, I mean, there was a colleague of mine that set a meeting for 8 o'clock this morning, and I said to him right away, "No, I will have one at 8:30, thank you, and we'll talk for 30 minutes." He very kindly accepted, but and I think you're absolutely right. The fact that we're all being forced into this world now, and the typical way was we would always have that 1 hour meeting if we were meeting face to face or in a pub, restaurant, cafe, whatever. And you'd, after the usual kind of how are you and the usual colloquial greetings, there's this whole element around you being used to doing it in that way, and then when you do that on Zoom, you're just going from meeting to meeting. There's no time to almost actually breathe after each meeting. So I think you're absolutely right that having a way of being able to really inject the possibility of having someone take the notes for you, if you like, take the minutes for you. But then what about taking actions out, and maybe is there some key phrases that could be built in to say action, so and so and so on, and maybe it allocates it to someone. What are the sort of thoughts around some integrations there?
Yeah, and we're actually seeing a lot of that now. So you'll begin to see more and more companies coming in and doing this. So Gong.io is an interesting one, who are a Salesforce enablement tool who listen into calls and they dial into it. A lot of these new tools dial into your WebEx meeting or your Teams meeting or something, and it's a bit intrusive actually to have its kind of thing saying I've dialed in, but nonetheless they are very good at helping pick out actions. And I think that one of the things we're going to see with NLU is people having the ability to condense meetings, to summarize them and issue actions, and then can you then dump it into a Slack bot? for example. So, we're looking at people who are doing Slack integrations for meetings and that type of thing. So there's actually some really interesting stuff coming out in the market. And I think we're going to see a real wave of innovation, which is being forced on us by the fact that we're all working like this. And I, for one, am delighted, because I think that when we do actually finally get back to the workplace, maybe we'll take some of this discipline with us. Maybe we'll actually say no meeting should be longer than half an hour. There will be an agenda. We'll stick a recording device in the middle of the table, and we'll let that, using clever AI and NLU, begin to capture some of those actions. But thing to remember is the technology is not perfect. Speech recognition is not perfect. NLU is not perfect. So, don't believe the hype on everything that you read. And I always say that in this space. There's a lot of promise. Look at what can actually be delivered. But yes, some really interesting stuff out there.
And
sorry, go on. No, Jack, really, I've spoken far too much.
I was just going to say, and that really lends down to the complexities that we talked about in episode 1. And I think that some of the use cases around NLU are absolutely going to be forced upon organizations, but it's about that awareness that meets adoption. And really how that then integrates within an organization's workflow as well as an individual's workflow, really. So where now are we going to start seeing NLU being adopted? Have there been any recent announcements or?
Oh, well, one of the big ones is in the telemedicine, and that's kind of a podcast in itself, really, in terms of where that's being adopted. But actually, BioMelotron, just released by NVIDIA, really interesting BERT-based tool to do question answering on medical stuff, claims to be 90+% accurate. We're doing our own assessment of that at the moment. And I think it'd be really interesting to come back and explore some of the telemedicine use cases, which are becoming huge. We're seeing massive interest in that, maybe in a future episode.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, I think we'll segue that into a future episode. But if I can sort of summarize in a few moments there that, Zoom fatigue is real. It's coming, and people are starting to experience it now. My recommendation to anyone really is to just really assess, how long your meeting should be. Whether it should be an hour-long meeting, maybe reduce it down to 45 minutes. If someone books a 30-minute, try and reduce it down to 20. I like to have some break between, so I can actually maybe even do some work, do some email. But no, I think that was really good. And I look forward to seeing you in a future episode, Nigel. But we certainly have some more guests coming up, including someone from ARM as well. ARM, if you'll remember, have just been, announced to be acquired by NVIDIA for $40 billion. So Jensen's spending some cash, you'll see. But thanks again, Nigel. Really appreciate your time today. And please look out for future episodes, guys. Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks a lot. Bye.